This morning we have two representatives from the city of El Cajon with us. El Cajon is the first city in our county to use its land use authority to pass an ordinance that gives the city more control over monitoring problematic neighborhood markets and liquor stores. Our first speaker is El Cajon Mayor Bill Wells. And Mayor Wells was appointed in October 2013 after 2 terms on the El Cajon City Council. In addition to serving as mayor, Mayor Wells is a mental health professional. He has a PhD. He works with several severely mentally ill in both clinical and administrative roles at local hospitals. He's also served on the El Cajon Planning Commission and the Grossmont Union High School District's Proposition H Bond Oversight Committee. Moreover, he has been appointed to the Executive Committee and the Board of the San Diego Association of Governments, SANDAG. And our second speaker is Captain Jeff Davis, who has served the El Cajon Police Department for over 30 years as both a volunteer and an employee. He volunteered with the department in 1984 as a reserve police officer and was hired by the city in 1986 as a regular police officer. Captain Davis has a bachelor's degree in business management and is a graduate of the Supervisory Leadership Institute and Command College, both programs of the California Peace Officers Standards and Training Organization. As I mentioned earlier, Captain Davis is El Cajon's incoming police chief beginning December. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Wells and Captain Davis.
Thank you very much. Actually, I have my own microphone.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and welcome to El Cajon. You know, I grew up in the San Diego area. I was born and raised as a child in the southeast part of San Diego. It was a little bit of a rough neighborhood. And when I would walk to school today, I'd pass by all the liquor stores and those gentlemen's clubs that I had no idea what was going on inside there. And and I saw a lot of crime and I saw a lot of disorganization, a little disorder in my neighborhood. It was just my mom and me, and as I grew up, I think my mom realized that she had to get me out of that neighborhood, and she did something very nice for me. She moved me up to Rancho Bernardo, which was a huge culture shock to me. So I'm living in a neighborhood where most of my friends, their dads were working class guys, or a lot of times they were in prison, or they're absent, a lot of absent dads. And then I go to Rancho Bernardo, and everybody's dad's a CEO or a CFO or a doctor or an attorney, and I saw a different side of life. And one of the things I saw was that Rancho Bernardo was a planned community. They weren't growing in the early part of the century. They didn't come about until the 1970s, and they had looked at some of the other communities, and they said, you know, we want to have a very clean and planned community. And a lot of people don't like that. They say it's too sterile, it's too boring. But coming from what was really kind of a dangerous neighborhood, I just loved it. I thought, oh my gosh, this is heaven. And so, of course, when I got out of college, I met my wife and got married. I told her we're going to move to Rancho Bernardo, and she said, no, we're moving to El Cajon. And that was the end of that. And I have to admit that I was reluctant. I had come to El Cajon several times when I was at San Diego State. I came down here for various reasons, and when I came down here, I saw a lot of crime. I saw the Hells Angels. I knew that the people sold meth down here. I knew that the Pussycat Theater was down here, and the F Street Bookstore, and you know, it was a rough place. And it kind of reminded me of when I was a kid. And I wasn't excited about that, but I got involved in city politics, and you know, there are a lot of good people that got involved. I think all of us had the same idea, and that was we didn't have to accept the problems that we had and just say, well, that's just the way it is. We had an opportunity to make changes, and so that's kind of brings us to why we're here today. This deemed approved ordinance that the city has adopted was not just an island, it's not just a thought by itself, it's part of an overall strategy to reclaim some of the problem areas of El Cajon and make El Cajon a much better place to live and work and do business. And we've been in a concerted effort to do that. And I think if those of you who haven't been here in a while, I would ask you to drive over to the arch, the new arch we have, and maybe walk down Main Street. And if you came here in the 70s and 80s, you won't even recognize the city. It is completely transformed. Crime is down 39% in the last 5 years. In fact, thanks to our great police department, by the way. In fact, last year, our trending crime reports for this last year were down more than, I think, any other city in the county. This year, we're going to see the first 2 4-star hotels in the entire East County come to El Cajon. We're going to get a new hospital, new Mercedes-Benz, new BMW, Panera Bread. The mall sees 12 million people a year come through. We have an airport. There's a lot of great things happening in El Cajon, and El Cajon gets better and better. And we have a multi-pronged effort to increase the livability of the city. We're cleaning up some of the dilapidated apartment complexes with the crime-free multi-housing program, doing the same program with some of the seedier motels. And we're telling folks, look, if you want to do business here and you want to be here, we want you here, but you've got to raise the standards, raise the bar. We're not going to accept a low standard of living. In our multiple planning sessions on how to achieve this goal, which is granted a 30-year goal, it's not going to happen overnight. One of the major problems that we saw was the availability of alcohol in our city. Now, alcohol is legal, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. There's a lot of people who enjoy drinking alcohol, but I was telling my son the other day, it's interesting how things can be good and bad depending on how you use them. For example, water, we all need water to live, but if you look at what happened to Katrina 10 years ago, water destroyed that community. And alcohol is very similar. Alcohol can be a nice part of life in America, life in the world, life in the family. But if it's misused, all of us know what happens when alcohol is misused. So government does play a role in regulating how alcohol is sold and dealt with in a community. We looked at our situation, and we have 79 retail outlets in El Cajon that sold alcohol. Most of those being liquor stores, some of them being Vons and CVS and other similar type off-sale site alcohol vendors. We really, if we were planning the city today, if El Cajon was just starting today and we had a vast area of land, we would think that about half of that number would be about what we should have for the population that we have in El Cajon. So that gives us problems, though, because we're not in a position where we as the government can tell people that we're going to put you out of business. That's not legal, and it's not ethical either. I mean, people were allowed to build their alcohol stores. They're making a living doing that. It's not our place to come in and say, you can't. However, I think it's well within our bounds to come in and say, you've got to follow the rules. You've got to be a good neighbor. You've got to be part of developing a healthy place to live. Some of the problems that we saw was, probably our main problem, was selling of alcohol to minors. And we were worried about that. But we also saw a lot of public drunkenness. We saw people urinating on buildings. We saw a proliferation of homelessness that kind of wrapped around this whole alcohol lifestyle. You know, it's kind of an offshoot, but I work, 4 hours ago I was in Scrubs and in the ER doing psychiatric evaluations. I deal with a lot of homeless folks. And one of the things that surprised me when I first got involved in that was that people who are homeless are not just down on their luck. Some are, but most people that are homeless because they choose to be. They they don't want to stop drinking, they don't want to stop using drugs, they don't want to get into a program, they don't want to go to St. Vincent's, they don't want to go to the San Diego Rescue Mission because they have to stop drinking. And so we have a lot of alternatives for people who would like to get off the streets, and we are very active in providing programs for those kind of folks. But there's a lot of people who just, under any circumstances, won't get off the streets because they want to lay around and drink. They want to panhandle until you get enough money to buy another drink it, lay down, panhandle, do it again, do that 24 hours a day. We saw a lot of our alcohol folks who were salespeople that were completely comfortable with that kind of idea. It generated income for them, and they didn't seem to care that people were afraid to go down 2nd Street. They were afraid to get out of their cars and go in and buy a loaf of bread because they'd have to step over aggressive panhandlers and people who were obviously intoxicated. And so that started us in a process, which I think is the right process, by the way, of just talking with the industry, of saying, hey, we got a problem. What can you all do to help us figure this out? And that probably lasted, 6-7 years, where we would get to a point where we said, we need to enact some kind of an ordinance. And the alcohol industry would come and say, no, you don't need to act any ordinances. Oh, yeah, that's against business. You're going to destroy business. You're anti-American. You got to stop that. And we would say, okay, all right, but you've got to fix it, right? And they say, oh yeah, no, don't worry, we're going to fix it. We're going to self-police. You watch. You come back a year from now, this problem's going to be solved. Well, we come back a year from now, and the problem would be exactly the same or even worse. Eventually, we heard about this deemed approved concept. It's a confusing title. Basically, what it means is that coming at the alcohol issue from a different direction through the land use, we can control, or at least enforce, some standards. See, before, if you had opened up a liquor store up until the 1990s, there were no conditional use permits involved in opening up a liquor store. So if you were doing something wrong, the only recourse we had as a city was to call the alcohol beverage control and try to get them down to enforce. And I think they've got 3 people working for the state of California in the alcohol beverage control, and they're a little busy. And it was just one of these plausible deniability things where the liquor stores would wink at us and say, oh, we're completely controlled by ABC, don't worry about it. And we would say, okay, but we knew nothing was getting done. We had no enforcement ability. So Oakland came up with this concept of the deemed approved ordinance, which gave us the power to do the same thing through land use. And I kind of got off track, but what I was saying was that before the 1990s, there was no conditional use permit, and then we finally got to the point where we instituted the conditional use permit to open up a new liquor store. But then we had a situation where a small number of the liquor stores we had some control over, and most we didn't because they were grandfathered in. And that was intolerable. Nothing was getting done. So when we heard about this deemed approved ordinance, we started the process of talking about instituting it. And boy, you would think that we were seceding from the union. I mean, the folks were upset. The lobbyists who control the alcohol industry in San Diego have a lot of money, and they have a lot of power, and they're not afraid to threaten us. And boy, they told us that we got involved in this, and every single one of us would be voted out of office. They would spend $1 million in alcohol to make sure that we were never elected again, and they would kill this thing, and they would show any other city that was thinking about doing it what would happen to a city council and a mayor that dared to even talk about this. And frankly, we saw that kind of behavior happening. We passed the ordinance, immediately were sued. I went through the court system, and we were justified by the courts to say that this is you're perfectly within your rights to do this as a city. Once we got the deemed approved ordinance in place, and what the deemed approved ordinance means basically is that now we're able to bring you in and regulate your behavior up to including fines and even revocation of the ability to sell if you don't follow the rules. Of course, we told everybody that that's the last thing we want to do. We don't want to hurt business. We would have a very measured approach to dealing with it incrementally. But of course, there was a lot of concern about it. Once the lawsuits were over and the threats were over and the election was over, everybody was safely in place to move forward, we did start the enforcement process. We started that with a number of decoys. We would send minors into alcohol retailers to purchase alcohol. And we were a little surprised. We, Tony, how many things did we do the first, about 70? Okay, we did 116 of these decoy operations, and it turned out about 27% of the retailers sold to minors. That is a huge number, especially considering the fact that they knew that this law had passed, and we had told them this was coming. We had no idea how high the number was before that. Some of these places sold alcohol to minors twice, and we decided to start with enforcement of these retail outlets that sold to minors twice. Brought them in. There was a realignment of some of the things they were allowed to sell. There were some fines involved, and pretty quickly the industry realized that we were serious about this and they had to clean up. I want to point out that nobody's gone out of business. We're not running anybody out of business, but we have seen some positive impacts. I've got some statistics here. So in 2012, officers made 526 arrests for public drunkenness. In 2014, after the ordinance, that number reduced to 344. In 12, 148 arrests for drinking in public went down to 109. And the most important one is in 2012, we had 29 arrests for minors in possession of alcohol. And after the ordinance, we had 2 arrests for minors. Where we're going from here, probably the next step is I expect us to put a ballot initiative in the 2016 election that would codify this ordinance in the city charter. Now, the reason that is because people are still actively fighting this process. And as it stands right now, there's an easy solution. Pour enough money into El Cajon, you can get the El Cajon city council members unseated with a pro-alcohol council person, and of course, you can get a new mayor that won't be up here talking to people like you. If we put it into the city charter, even if a whole new city council comes in, a new mayor comes in, they can't undo this unless they take it back to a vote of the public. And then they'll have to explain to people why they want to give more control to liquor stores. And we frankly don't think that would ever happen. We think that once it gets codified in the charter, it will be there forever. So I'm going to stop speaking now, and I'm going to ask Captain Davis to come up. After he's got a very nice PowerPoint. After he's done, I'll come back up, and Captain Davis and I will both answer any questions that you might have, and we'll go from there. Thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate you listening. And now if you can give a warm round of applause to Captain Davis. Thank you, Captain.
You good, Autumn? We'll get you on here just for a second. Hold on one.
Turn it off, yeah.
It'd be good.
Good. Well, thank you, and what a pleasure, Eric. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak. It's an honor, and I recognize a lot of faces here, so I feel comfortable with this crowd. Can you guys hear me in the back? Everything okay? No? I'm not a mic person, but would this help? Yes. Much better? All right, well, in full disclosure, I'm not a public speaker, so when I was asked to do this, I reached out to some folks who are experts at it, and I said, give me some advice. And they said only 2 things. You only have to remember 2 things. One, be witty, and two, have a PowerPoint. So I have a PowerPoint. You also heard in my introduction, I've been around the department almost 30 years, so I'm technically challenged. I have two pieces of equipment that are battery operated right now, so please bear with me when we go through this. I know we made some introductions at the beginning of this. I just want to reintroduce somebody because it's great that I see uniforms here and I see members of law enforcement, people that I know, but really this whole program was a community group effort. Law enforcement only being a small component of that. So the fact that you're all here as community members, I mean, it really speaks to the success of this program. However, the reason I say that, I am not the expert in deemed approved. Being a part of the police department, I'm an element, I'm a component of the city that helped make this a success. And the reason I'm about to throw this person's name out and introduce you to him is this one person was largely responsible for being one of the architects of the program. And again, it's our planning director, Tony Shute. Tony, if you could stand up, please. And the reason it's so important I introduced Tony is, you know, I'm fortunate enough to be up here speaking to you, but when I have questions, he's the guy I call. And he really is the expert on this. What I'd like to do, though, is show you a PowerPoint and speak briefly about the law enforcement aspect of this, what our involvement was, and you know, some of the challenges that we face. So this deemed approved ordinance, I was sitting here as the mayor was speaking, and thank you, Mayor Wells, for framing the context of this whole issue so well. And really, I can just take questions now because he did a great job, and he really explained the program, the issues that we face, and where we're from this point forward, what we're looking at. But to back it up a little bit, I'm looking at this title page as the mayor's speaking, and it really, you know, the three issues there really talk about who's involved. So the local control of retail outlets at the city level, it's not the police department's job. The city took that on. If you go down to the next one, reduction of crime, that's an issue that we wanted to address. And improve quality of life, that was the community aspect. So right there, just these three issues really tie this whole program together and why we're all here today. And I also want to thank Eric. Eric stepped out for a second for helping with this. Thank you for this PowerPoint, Eric. If it's a really good PowerPoint, it's mine. If it's terrible, it was Eric's because he did it. All right, so here we go with the technology. Deemed approved ordinance. So again, as the mayor discussed this, the issues with this is ABC regulates alcohol licenses. That's not what the deemed approved ordinance is about. It's a local ordinance that helps enhance the city's capabilities to oversee alcohol sales. Establishments that sell off-premise alcohol. And I'll tell you a little story. So, any Paul Harvey fans in here? All right, I'm going to go off script. I'm going to tell you the rest of the story. Here it is. This whole thing started several years ago when we started getting complaints of a specific town or section of town on 2nd Street. If you're not familiar with El Cajon, 2nd Street is mostly businesses, and it's a main corridor through El Cajon. A lot of the businesses were complaining about some specific issues, a lot of it to do with homelessness, but public drunkenness, alcohol sales, panhandling, and they were fed up with it. They reached out to the city worked with them, and of course, us, the police department being that component of the city to work enforcement, we got involved. So here's the community aspect of it. We reached out to those members on 2nd Street, which was mostly businesses. We have this great idea. Let's hold a forum, and all of the folks that are stakeholders on 2nd Street, why don't you guys come talk to us? That's really scary when you're in the police department, by the way, when you get the group and you know they're not happy to begin with and you want to sit down with them and they're going to explain what the problems are. Well, they did. And I remember that very first meeting, we held it in a restaurant. And let's see, for disclosure here, I'm going to see if Gary Davis, are you in the audience? Not related to me? Okay, I'm going to tell a story. I'm only going to tell this story because Gary Davis is a friend of mine now. But I distinctly remember him on that first meeting. Gary, and several of you were there. Gary owns a business on 2nd Street. He was one of the people that was complaining about the homelessness issue. So we didn't know who he was, and it was a pretty packed house. It was very vocal. I won't say contentious, but very vocal. A lot of people were expressing their concerns about the homeless issues, the alcohol issues, and in particular, Gary Davis was very vocal to the point where, quite frankly, he was a pain in the neck. He was complaining about the lack of response from the police department, all of the problems with the city. And what I didn't realize at the time, but I soon learned, is Gary wasn't a complainer, he was a critic. And the difference is a complainer can never be satisfied, but a critic was just pointing out some weak points. And eventually what happened was that group, several of those members are sitting here at the front table, actually formed. And they formed into an organization called an Alliance for a Better Community. Ironically, the acronym was ABC. That started from nothing more than a forum, a meeting at a restaurant. So there is your community involvement right there with the police department. That ABC group, not to be confused with the state ABC, actually started to convene and talk about ways that we can solve the problem, not just with the police department. So you see the business and customers 2nd Street were surveyed. Part of that group grew to involve Institute for Public Strategies. And first met Joyce at that meeting, and they brought in an army of resources to help us. So instead of just having a group explain to us their concerns, IPS was one of the leaders, professionals, and said, let's do a survey, an official survey. Let's find out what the real problems are. Let's find out what the real concerns are. And if those of you who are familiar with the SARA model of community policing, you scan for the problem, you analyze what it is, you respond, and then you assess your effectiveness. So we knew what the problem was. We just wanted to come up with a response to it. So we held some more forums, and we're now at the point where we're the ABC group, and these were some of the issues that came up in the survey. Of course, public drinking, intoxication, sales to serial inebriates. I like to say drunkards because I have a tough time saying inebriates. Aggressive panhandling, illegal lodging, assault, theft. Now, a lot of these things are related to homeless. We did not want to make this a homeless issue. However, that was a big component of it. What we found eventually was, as far as the solutions go, we needed more buy-in from everybody involved. Now, I mentioned there was 3 components: the police department, the city, and the community. At this point, and the reason I bring this up, I got a call from another agency, ironically in the Bay Area. I know Oakland was one of the first to do the deemed approved, but this was a large agency in the Bay Area, and they are trying to institute a similar program. In fact, theirs has been in existence for a while, and they're having an extreme difficulty gaining any traction. And he asked, well, what's your success? Why did you guys get that done? And I said it was because of the stakeholders. I said it was because the community bought into this and they're helping us. And it's because the city is driving this, and we have the support of the mayor, the council, the city manager, and the planning department. And really, I could end the presentation right here by saying if you get those 3 involved, you're going to get solutions. And that's what we're seeing, and that's what I told him. And I actually told him if he wanted to come down later and go through this, I would introduce him to the players. So again, that's why it was so important that the mayor spoke, and that I had a chance to introduce Tony, because the police department certainly would not have been able to do this on our own. It's very, and if you know how police respond to things, we do special details. When there's a problem in an area, we saturate it with police presence. And of course, that solves the problem temporarily, but it's not sustainable. It may temporarily relieve the problem, and I'm sure most people that are stakeholders at that point are appreciative, but it comes back. So in this particular case, the actions taken were typical. We increased enforcement. Then we also came up with an idea through the group, and again, here's the community involvement aspect of it. We created this do not sell list. The do not sell list was a combination of identifying the key drunkards, serial inebriates. The 20% of the folks that were causing the 80% of the problems on 2nd Street, again, I'm still talking about the 2nd Street area. We identified those serial inebriates that were causing most of the problems. It was really easy because it's the same names that kept coming up. When we ran records checks, we ran all the calls for service on 2nd Street, it was the same names. Well, it didn't take a hammer to hit us on the head to realize that's our problem. So we created, and it was all alcohol-based, I should point that out. So we created a list of those people, not like an America's Most Wanted list, but basically just a list. Here's that handful of people that are coming to around your businesses causing problems. And of course the group said exactly, those are the folks, those are the folks. It wasn't the average people, it was these same handful of people. So we created this list, and it had their picture, their name, and who they were. And we presented the idea to the liquor retail businesses on 2nd Street. It actually went to all of the businesses, but specifically we spoke to the retail, alcohol retail businesses. If these folks come in, please don't sell alcohol to them because they're the problem that you're complaining about. It was voluntary. It was nothing more than an education piece. And we gave it to all of the establishments, all of the businesses, but in particular, we asked the liquor stores, please do not serve them. So the do not sell list was born from the ABC group. It was voluntary only. It was our first attempt at a sustainable solution to the issues going on 2nd Street. Eventually, again, we wanted to make this voluntary. We didn't want to press anything on anybody, but again, the community was not complaining. The community was bringing the issues to us. We were working with the community and the city to come up with some solutions. One of the other solutions was this Good Business Neighbor Pledge. And it was a signed pledge not to sell to these folks on the do not sell list. Again, this was voluntary. Don't sell to serial inebriates. They're the ones causing the problems. Maintain a clean environment, basically attractive, and post the proper signage. Again, these are all things that these businesses, according to ABC, should be doing to begin with, but let's just say for lack of education, they may not have known that. So at this point, we're still in the voluntary education stage of the process. So we do a second survey. Again, I can't thank IPS and the ABC group enough because they were heavily involved in this. In fact, I think IPS did a lot of the legwork and had a lot of the manpower sending. That was a lot of flyers going out up and down 2nd Street. And we tried to canvass the entire area. We wanted the truest data we could get. And having a cop in a uniform there skews the data. We didn't want to do that. So we were trying to do this as legitimately as possible. So we do this survey, and we're trying to determine if this self-policing volunteer approach that we're doing is working. So some of the things we asked for, is there any improvement noted? Alcohol nuisance activity, is it pushed out of the other parts of the city? Here's an interesting thing that we found. So it was slightly effective. We started to see less serial inebriates. We started to see less of the alcohol homeless issues, which was great. Now, El Cajon geographically isn't a big area, but population-wise, we're pretty big. We're over 100,000. So what we found out was we were squeezing the balloon. And we may have deflated it in this area, but it was popping up in other areas of El Cajon. We did a great job on 2nd Street, and we got a lot of applause from the business owners on 2nd Street, but what we found was those issues, the alcohol-related issues, the homeless issues, just got pushed to other parts of El Cajon. And it was at that point we realized, we have a great program here, but we probably need to expand this a little bit. So some of the observations, again, is do not sell list 5 of the locations on 11 different occasions. The inspections conducted 24 off sale. Minor decoy operations conducted at 11 of the off sale. 3 retailers were cited for selling to minors. So in a nutshell, we're in 2011, And the city council starts discussing, as the mayor brought up, this deemed approved ordinance. And again, it was new to us. So the city council said, well, we're not done working with the community yet. I mean, this is a good first step. What you did on 2nd Street worked. Let's see if we can do that citywide. We involved stakeholders. All of this, by the way, just like everybody sitting here, you're all a stakeholder in this. And that was really the approach from the beginning with the city. Let's involve all of the stakeholders. We can't solve this ourselves, so let's reach out to as many members of the community as we can. Well, one of the biggest stakeholders is the Neighborhood Market Association. Most of the liquor retail establishments were members of this organization. So we had one organization that could speak for many of these groups. So we involved them immediately as a stakeholder in our group. So again, the 2nd Street ABC, the police department, we conducted new surveys now after all of these approaches, held more community events, and as the mayor said, we looked at the results. So now in the SARA model, we're in the analysis, right? We scanned for the problem, we analyzed it, we responded, and now we're assessing how successful were we. And as the mayor said, when we started looking at the difference between the alcohol-related public nuisance calls from when we started, citywide, they were the same or more. 2nd Street, great. Rest of the city, everything was going up. Why? Because we were pushing it to other parts of the city. And in reality, that's probably not the best practice. The mayor went over some of these stats, so now a year later, we're looking at all of these, again, as the mayor went through. A little dollar figure there on the bottom, you know, the fiscal impact to a city that these issues cause, not to mention to the private businesses that are being impacted to this by these issues as well. Kind of hard to read there, but you'll see a little bit. You know, the blue is our first run in April. You can see where they stand, and then you can see a jump, a spike in September, the orange. I attribute that to education. Now we were educating the community. We were doing more enforcement details, so we saw a spike in some of the arrests. But the interesting issue is after that, in February now, there's still a spike. This was a squeezing the balloon effect I was talking about. We were taking care of 2nd Street, but we were pushing it to other parts of the city. So what I'm trying to do here is frame that the voluntary aspect, much to what the mayor said, was working in one specific area, but it was creating problems in the rest of the city. It wasn't sustainable, it wasn't total for the city. So in February, the city council really looked at this deemed approved ordinance. I'm going to go off script here and tell you another Paul Harvey story. Before this all started, years before this started, I had a meeting with Dana from CASA. Dana, I saw you in the back there. Can you raise your hand? Communities Against Substance Abuse. I'm going to throw myself down, Dana. Dana and I met, and Dana explained this deemed approved ordinance to me. Said, you know, I really think this would work for the city. What do you think? I said, it'll never work, Dana. So, you know, hats off to her. And again, that's a tribute to IPS and CASA, community groups. We'd like to think we have all the answers. We really don't. So the answers come from the community groups, and so does the response, which is why it's such a pleasure to sit up here and stand up here and talk to you folks, because you know, in all humility, I don't mind admitting the police department can't do this without the community, and that's what this is a classic example of. So this is where my friend Tony Shute comes into play. The city council said, okay, this is it. We have given this group plenty of ample opportunity to self-police themselves. We've helped them, we've held their hand, we've done everything we can. It's just pushing we need to be accountable to the community. We need to do something. So the deemed approved ordinance was drafted, and again, I think Tony had a great deal, a great amount of effort into it. He really is a brilliant guy, because I mean, he can explain this process like I can't, and it comes easy to him. It's very not natural to me. August 27th, City Council adopts the deemed approved ordinance. I remember that because that was my birthday, which was yesterday, by the way. Thank you. It became effective November 2013. Now, here's the really complex stuff. What is deemed approved? And the mayor even said it sounds so negative, and it's not. So the deemed approved allows the city to address future problems. Basically, in a nutshell here, this is what it is. All of the retail alcohol establishments in the city are deemed approved to continue business. So they're grandfathered in. They're deemed approved. That's where that phrase comes from. You are deemed approved under your conditional use permit to continue doing what you're doing. If you're a new ABC coming into the city to do business, not only do you have to abide by those rules, but there are some more, I like to say, common sense rules that you're going to have to abide by. And there's a whole list of those, and I can give you a small example. And these are things that the city asked the police department to assist them in. Little things like selling the alcohol, they call them the airline bottles, well, there's only one purpose for those. They're cheap, they're affordable, and what we recognize when we deal with serial inebriates and homeless issues, we always find those bottles around their encampments. We based a lot of the intelligence we gave to the city on the facts that we discovered in dealing with a lot of the serial inebriates, in dealing with that 20%. That was the data that we gave the city that they could work with. Creating a safe environment for your facility, managing the sales of your alcohol. The mayor mentioned, other than the serial inebriate issue, one of the biggest concerns from all of us was the sales of alcohol to minors. We need to protect our youth. That's very important, and we really weren't capturing that. Honestly, I think a lot of it was education or lack of education by some of the retailers and some of their employees. So this new deemed approved kind of encourages those businesses to pay attention to those things, to train themselves, to train their employees. So again, it's an education piece more than anything. So as the mayor mentioned, we took a look at the statistics after a 2-year period from when we first instituted this until a little more recently. Public drunkenness down, drinking in public down, and then of course, what I'd like to point out, what the mayor did, the minors in possession, we almost got rid of that. Now the reason these numbers are really significant, the gray, the reduction, that was after we were focusing enforcement on these places. In reality, it should have been higher because now we're paying attention and we're doing these details. But what we found was it actually dropped. The only thing we can conclude is that the program's working. So let's talk about this minor decoy operation because there has been some contention about that. The minor decoy operation, again, we conducted these on 79, it is updated. All 79 of our office retailers. They're selected at random. Before I go any further, I want to introduce some officers who are sheepishly hiding in the back here. Sergeant Greg Robertson, please raise your hand. Officer Louis Michael, Officer Brian Ellers, Sergeant Matt Conlon, and their boss, Lieutenant Randy Soulard. I wanted to introduce them because I really wanted to give credit to them. Their unit was largely responsible for a lot of these operations. And in doing so, they had to become experts on deemed approved as well as their regular duties. So they took it upon themselves to research the procedures for the minor decoy operations. They came up with these plans. So the retailers were selected at random. When they did the operations, out of the 79 at the time, 27% of them sold to a minor, which is pretty significant. Now, the good news, if there is good news out of that, only 3 of them did it twice. And that was our cutoff, that was our threshold. And we had to come up with some sort of metrics to enter these folks into the deemed approved program. The reason we put these, the actual businesses up is, and I'll give you a little behind the scenes story on it. Sky Fuel, for instance, was visited 4 times. on 2 separate occasions, only 3 months apart, okay, only 3 months apart, the same clerk sold to a different minor decoy, all right? So only 2 months apart. Arnell Liquor and Tykes Liquor were the other two that sold more than once. And we'll talk a little bit about what our program actually is. So, the El Cajon Police Department minor decoy. And the only reason I throw this out, and I'll explain it in a second here, is it's important to understand the objectivity we tried to build into this program. The minors are under 21 for real, but over 18. They appear to be under 21, and we do that on purpose, obviously. We take a picture of the decoy at the time of the operation, the way they're dressed, the way they look. So it's common sense. They look like they're under 21. We have a police officer present in the business, or we have a live audio video feed of what's going on at the time. It's kind of the cool undercover aspect of it. The decoy in our program uses their actual ID. Now, if you don't know, if you're under 21, your driver's license is printed laterally, not horizontally. All right, and there's a reason for that. So it's very obvious you're under 21. So they're using their actual under 21 identification when they go in. I know nobody here has one of those, so I won't ask for an example. The decoy makes an attempt to buy an obvious alcoholic beverage that somebody that age would buy, right? An 18-year-old is not going to go in and buy, I don't know, Heineken or whatever. They go for the kid drinks, basically, the drinks that are, I think, are marketed towards kids. They use a $20 bill, and we mark the $20 bill before they go in. We also recover that same $20 bill as evidence. The alcoholic beverage is photographed and it's returned to the store. And you might ask, why do you do that? Because we're not trying to penalize the store. We're not going to take any of their profits. We're not going to take their product. This is, even though it's enforcement, there's an education aspect to this as well. Lastly, the clerk is cited for the business and profession code right then and there by one of these officers who's part of the program. Before I move forward, I did want to mention one thing about the minor decoy program. ABC has a minor decoy program, and a lot of law enforcement agencies use their format. The ABC minor decoy program is an administrative program. By that I mean ABC goes after the liquor license. They hold the business accountable strictly for that liquor license, and if you don't know, it's very expensive to get one of those licenses. Their program mimics ours, or I should say our program mimics theirs, except for one exception. Under the ABC program, when the state sends a minor decoy in, if the clerk asks the decoy, are you over 21? They cannot lie, and at that point they have to say no. Well, obviously the clerk's not going to sell it to them. Under our program, I'd like to say we subscribe to the common sense theory, because in reality, somebody that's under 21 is not going to tell them that. Under our program, if the clerk asks, are you over 21, we let the minor decoy say yes, which should force still the clerk to check their real ID, which clearly states they're under 21. So that is the one exception. And we have not run into any issues with that. In fact, I reviewed all of the cases of the minor decoy programs. 9 out of 10 times, the clerk looks at the real ID and then processes the sale. In fact, one of those businesses had one of the machines that you swipe it and it automatically tells you the date. The clerk never bothered to use it. Looked at the ID twice and conducted the sale. Looked at the ID like this, obviously, because he had to turn it because they were under 21, and conducted the sale. I just wanted to throw that out there. So moving forward, you know, the City Council wanted to make it very clear that this isn't punitive. We want business in El Cajon. We don't want to penalize these folks. A lot of this is education. Maybe they just don't know what they're doing wrong and how to do it right. So moving forward, the council directed us to come up with some method to reward those businesses of those 79, the ones that didn't sell. And what we came up with is this responsible retailer program. Now that little emblem is actually a sticker about the size of a Better Business Bureau sticker, and we designed it about that size to stick in the front door or the window of their business, hopefully next to a Better Business Bureau sticker, to show consumers that they are a responsible retailer. And what that means is we have visited their store, we have conducted operations, and they passed. So we wanted to make sure that the community is aware that they are abiding by all of the regulations and the deemed approved ordinance. This first one will be awarded in December, I believe. Tony, is that correct? December at the council meeting for the first group of those establishments that successfully pass. And then, of course, every year we'll change the color and the date. And what we hope is that all 79 of our establishments will be flying those eventually. That really is the hope.